What if I told you that Brian May's tone doesn't come from his red special guitar? And it also doesn't come from a cranked AC30. It comes from a tiny little circuit that you can build at home. And today we're going to do just that. Let's make the treble booster that made Queen sound like Queen. Stick around to the end and I'm going to show you how to make this treble booster usable with a modern day rig. So this is everything we're going to need for our video today. And this is going to be a cracking one. For everyone who loved the Deaky amp and asked me to do a Brian May Rangemaster, here you go. And we're starting off with this enclosure. I mean, come on, look at this. It's a red leatherette. And I know the edges may look scruffy, but trust me, by the time this pedal's together, it's going to look pretty decent. But it's a red leatherette with a 1956 sixpence on it, because we all know that Brian May is accustomed to using a sixpence as a pick. So I thought that'd make a nice little feature. Now I know what you're thinking. Why is there a sixpence stuck to the top of this pedal? Well, you see, Brian May famously used a ground down sixpence as a pick. He liked the way it attacked the strings. He liked the tone he got from it. I personally can't play like that, but I did want to have a sixpence involved in the pedal, and that's why they are adorning the front. So this is like a little nod in that direction. Sort of like a badge of honour, a medal, if you will. And yeah, it's a real sixpence. They're dated differently. The earliest one starts at 1947. 1947, that's mental. And we've also got, and this is the bit that makes the aesthetic for me, is a set of official Brian May knobs. There you go. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is there two knobs? Because a Rangemaster only has one. Well, one of these knobs is going to control this, a transformer. We're going to add in a pickup simulator so we can use a vintage germanium transistor anywhere in a signal chain. Personally, I still prefer it at the beginning of the signal chain, but for those of you who want the added transformer in there, you know, anytime you can get some sort of transformer in your circuit, I just feel like the pedal always sounds better. Maybe that's psychosomatic. I'd love to know what you think about that. Maybe it is psychosomatic, you know. I think big transformer in there, then it's going to sound good. Whatever. What you will need is a tag board with 7 tags per side. You will also need some various boutique caps and resistors. You know, we've got, okay, let's start with this one. This is a Mullard mustard cap. It's a 5.6 NF cap. Now, off the top of my head, using my experience, and you know, I've built a fair few of these, this is the cap that I think we're going to need on the input to tune this pedal to sound like Brian May. But it could be wrong. I'm not going to solder it in straight away. We're going to run through different values, different types of caps, and we'll pontificate on that fact. But this is the one that I think will win out. We've also got the very last, and this is the very last one of these that I have, Sprague 2000 volt 22 NF caps, 2000 volt DC, and for anyone who works in any sort of electrical engineering capacity, you will know that that is a whopping amount. I mean, a Type 45 Destroyer with its massive Samsung radar doesn't even run off 2000 volt DC. That's insane. And the first component in today is the beast. It is the transformer. So this is something that I love to add to these builds. It is, of course, the input transformer circuit. Now, this thing comes from an article that was on AMZ, and it come out years ago, and it was about making a pickup simulator. This is just a Hello Sailor Effects version. This input transformer matches the impedance that the germanium transistor sees with the impedance of guitar pickups. So the germanium transistor reacts in a way as if it's first in the signal chain all the time. If you're going for those articulate, vocal Brian May tones, you're going to want to have one of these in the circuit, so then it plays nice with all your other pedals. And maybe you've got a wireless unit like the man himself. This thing would sort that out. Now, when you're situating your tag board, I like to have the end piece that has a little bit of overhang to the left hand side where our transformer sits. You don't have to, it doesn't really matter. When you buy your tag board, it should come in a strip like this, and each end has an end piece. And what I like to do is use them pieces like this, so that then we have a little ledge for our transformer to sit on. I mean, we're not going to just let it sit on there under its own weight. We will be using some good old JB Weld. Everyone knows how much I love that stuff. Right, so anyway, our transformer. You'll notice that there are 2 sides to your transformer with 3 legs per side. Now, we're not using this as a transformer, so it's a bit misleading me saying an input transformer, because it's not really being used as a transformer. It is being used as an inductor, like what you would find in a wah pedal, the halo inductor. That's kind of the same thing. So what do I mean by that? Well, this here is a bobbin with magnets in the middle, like a magnet there, and wire wrapped round. And then same again, wrapped round the same bobbin is another wire wrapped round it again. And that's what makes a transformer. Well, a halo is just one wire wrapped round one magnet. We are not going to use the side that doesn't have a P on. The P stands for primary, and we only use the primary side. So the opposite side, the secondary, we can just clip all them off. And for those who followed my Brian May DC amp build, you're going to find that really weird, because we did indeed use both the primary and secondary for both of the transformers in that build. Now also we have these handy little legs. What normally happens is they would go through the circuit board or the PCB and get bent over and then soldered on, and that's normally soldered to ground. It just is. We're not going to use that. You can either snip them off, or what I like to do is just take my Nipex snips and bend them flat, and I'm going to use that later on as an extra platform to get some steel reinforced epoxy, better known as JB Weld, on there. I'm going to utilise them for that, just to give this a bit of strength, because I mean, it's only small, but it's a bit of a chunk, I've got to say. Now our primary side, the centre leg, we're not going to use, so you can clip that out. We are just going to use each end of the coil, and I am going to give them a clean. I've had lots of people actually in my last video that I released, or that I filmed at this point, will be the Brian May amp build, and there's a lot of people telling me cleaning legs with the snips is no good. You know, use this, use that, try this, try that. And I have tried a lot of things, and I'm open to new things to try. It needs to be something that's as convenient as using my snips, and something that I get on with. It's not really a better or a worse thing for me. It's more of a thing of, will I be able to create the habit to do it without thinking? That's the thing. So for everyone who said that I'm doing things wrong and poo-pooed my way of doing things, that's brilliant. But, you know, it's not about right or wrong for me. It's about making it work today, tomorrow, and forever, under any conditions. And that's pretty much what I've been brought up engineering-wise to do. So our first 2 lugs are going to be these 2 wires on the primary side of our transformer. What I like to do is I like to just slot one leg through and then snip the other leg up to the level of the tag, and then slot that through, and there you go. What we want to do is we want to get it so then these two tabs are right up against the base of our board. But what we don't want to happen is the body of the transistor. Why do I keep saying that? The body of the transformer. We don't want it to short out on these tags, because our signal is going to go through here essentially, and this may be touching the enclosure, so we don't want to short it out. Once we get it sort of central, I mean, it doesn't have to be central, but you know, why not make it central if you can? We solder one side in, and then we can straighten it up. So once one side's in, as you can see, the weight of the transformer is just pulling that over. There's nothing I can do about that. But now that we've got one side soldered, we can straighten that up, make sure it's all good, and then solder the other side in. This is the bit that's going to allow the germanium transistor to see a guitar's pickup impedance, because it will always see this transformer. It won't see what's plugged into it, essentially, he says. Now that that's in, the other part of this circuit is going to be a 470 PF picofarad cap. Now, instead of using the 470 picofarad cap, I'm using this. It is indeed a Dubelier cap. It's a silver maker cap. It's an old one. It's the same as what you find in the old Filmo sounds and the like. And also, the reason why I'm using this is because Skip Simmons from the Truth About Vintage Amps podcast is a big fan of these domino caps, he calls them. But he's a big fan of these, which means that I'm a big fan of them, because he's a legend. I did have the absolute pleasure of being on the Truth About Vintage Abs podcast. And oh my God, was that fun. So I kind of didn't do myself any favours on that show, because I've been deployed in 2021 to the South China Sea for like 9 months, maybe a bit longer. And I'd sort of been building in isolation without really contact from anyone in the guitar world, or really anyone to bounce ideas off. And the first person I spoke to when I got back was Jason. So Jason got in touch and said, we'd love to have you on the show, but yada, yada, yada. And I said, yeah, obviously. But to do the show, I was like on a different time zone. So I pounded loads of coffee in, and I was like wired. But of course, I'm meeting one of my legends on a live podcast. Because Skip is like, well, you guys probably know anyway. He is like the man. And so I had so much I wanted to say, I couldn't hardly get my words out. But then when he asked me what I wanted to, did I have anything to say? My mind went blank and I couldn't talk. It was insane. Anyway, the episode is called something like He Runs Hot or whatever. It was in early 2022, I want to say. So if anyone wants to catch that one and listen to me sounding like an absolute tool. But them guys are amazing anyway. So because of Skip, I've chose this Dubelier cap. And this is actually a 510 PF. So it's not a 470 PF like it should be. It's a 510 PF. And I've got to say, right, this pickup simulator, this come from an AMZ article that every man and his dog knows about, but I didn't. And I was trying to figure this out. I was talking to Simon from JSA FX Pedals back in the day, probably 2017, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to use a transformer as an inductor to make this circuit. And I was trying all sorts of values, and nothing was sounding particularly good. And then I got talking to Stu Tate from Tate Effects, and he basically sent me a picture of this layout and said, use my layout and give me the cheat code, what transformer, what capacitor and all that jazz, which is fantastic. So fair play to Stu. He just sent me it without even really knowing me, to be fair, which is so generous. He's actually a really cool guy, to be fair on that one. Right, so we're going to solder this cap in place. And all this is going to do is this is just going to, after our transformer, and a pot, by the way, that's going to be involved, which is the control. But after that, this is just going to let our signal touch ground. So our signal will come in here and then go off to our range master. And this half of it here will just, attach to ground. And that way, any high frequency or high end noise, this will just take it out. If you go too heavy on this, if you put 1 NF or 2 NF or something bigger than that, it's going to start leaching your signal to ground and it'll sound dull and dark. And if you go to something like, 10 PF, 50 PF or whatever, it's not going to be enough to get rid of the noise, because, the transformer does induce a little bit of noise. That's why you'll notice that I don't do it often on my fuzz circuits. I don't often put this in, because sometimes it can be finicky and I run long wire and looms and all sorts of jazz. So I much prefer it on the range master. But we can solder both sides of our Silver Maker cap in. I've built 3 of these pedals that will be available at hellosailoreffects.com. You can find the link in the description. Now, these pedals that I've built have the same input transformer circuit. They have the same germanium transistor. They even have the same 6-pence adorning the front. If you're interested in these pedals, there is only 3 of them. Please head to hellosailoreffects.com now and get one while you can. Thank you for buying pedals, and thank you for supporting the Hello Sailor Effects brand. It's insane how much my channel and my brand have grown over the past year, and it's all down to you guys watching, following, and of course subscribing. Before we go on to the rest of our circuit, I'll just have a little talk through the drawing so you can see where we're going to go and what we're going to do with this circuit. Now, this is a little bit different because, well, mainly because this is my original Rangemaster drawing from many years ago. It's not done in the most fancy way, and I could have got my mate Jimmy Scandals to do me a nice drawing of it, but I thought that it would be cool to include the original Rangemaster drawing that I was working off back in 2017, 2018 when I first started doing this circuit. Or when I first started doing the circuit correctly, I should say. We've already wired in our transformer, and I've got a 500 PF cap here, or our 470 PF cap. Moving on, we've got a 47 microfarad cap that instead of going to ground over here, I'm actually going to run it over to this ground point here. So that'll run on the outside of our board. So we will not be looking at that until later on. Here we can see 100k trim pot. You can add a 100k trim pot if you want. I use that to adjust the bias. However, I found that a regular 68k standard resistor in this position is fine with a 22k or a 10k trim pot over here. So I'm going to be running a 68k resistor in this position. We have our 5NF cap, which we discussed before, that in this one it's going to be our mustard cap. We will go through some values though, don't worry, and test out some things and see exactly what's going to work for Brian May's sound. I may be wrong in my prediction. Then, coming out of this same pin here in the top row, we have a 470k resistor. I will say that if you don't test all your resistors, fine. I mean, I think that's silly, but fine. I would say definitely test this one. It's important. You don't want to be more than 2k out either way on this resistor. It makes it A, harder to bias, and B, it just never sounds good to my ears. It may be in my head, but I would not go above maybe 472 or down to 468. It's just much better to be bang on there. Here, you can see we've got a 1 meg resistor. No prizes for guessing what that resistor's for. 1 meg, it attaches to the input. That is, of course, our anti-pop resistor. All that does is allow any build-up of voltage that happens to pass through our input cap, because no cap is perfect. I mean, of course, if you're paying for high-end audio caps, they're probably going to be better, but no cap is perfect. So that'll just leach that off to ground. Then we have another 47 UF, or 47 microfarad for those people who like to tell me off on the internet for saying UF. Cheers for that before anyone gets it in there. We have another one of them in here. The previously mentioned 10k trim pot. I'll be using a 22k trim pot just because I've got some nice vintage ones. And then on our output cap, I've got 10NF here because the original Rangemaster had a 10NF cap, 10 nanofarads. Because we're doing Brian May's circuit with a smaller input cap to get that really high. He has like the treble booster sound, doesn't he? Let's face it. He used an original Rangemaster. I think we're going to want 5NF on the input. So rather than just have 10NF on the output, I want to give as much of the frequency out as possible. I mean, you could go higher, but I think 22NF will suffice. And I get to use my 2000 volt TC, actually, which is insane, Sprag cap, which I can't get anymore. My suppliers run out of them, so this is the last one. And that's all that it is. And because it's only a few components, each component really matters. Spend a bit extra on your components and your pots and stuff like that, and you won't regret it. Now, let's get back onto the circuit. What I am going to fit, if we take a look at our drawing, I always say that, it's becoming a catchphrase. We're going to add in, where this 100k trim pot is, we're going to add in a 68k resistor. We're going to leave our input cap alone. I'm going to leave that out of the circuit completely, and we'll add it in after we've tested the pedal. And then I'm also going to add in now the 470k resistor. The 68k resistor is going to be this one, and it's going to go across here like so. So we're going into the fourth tag along in the top row, and the third tag along on the bottom row. Coming from the fourth tag along on the top row and going along to the fifth tag along on the bottom row is our 470k resistor. So we take our resistor, place it through the tag on the bottom row. No, that's a lie. The tag on the top row. This will become apparent as to why. Push it in as far as it'll go. Then do our usual trick of snipping the leg as close to the bottom row tag as we can. Slide it in until the resistor is central. Then we take our flat nose pliers, our snips, grab hold of the resistor and bend it so it's straight, making sure that the bottom row, the leg stays in the tag in the bottom row. So you bend it so then it's straight. And what happens is, because we've got all this extra length in the top row, it will just bend and allow the resistor to come and sit straight. So that way we haven't got a resistor going across here and bunching up, and another one bunching up here and making it difficult to fit our input cap in at a later date. We can just have it like so. So if I was to now solder this bottom tag in, so then the resistor isn't going anywhere. Now we can come to our other resistor and do the same thing. So we're going to slide it into the top tag as far as it'll go. Do our usual snip at the bottom, and then put the resistor in. This time what we want to do is get it sitting as close to our 68k resistor as possible, or as parallel to the 68k resistor as possible. There we are. All you do is just manipulate it around. I do suggest using your flat nose pliers and not your snips. I mean, you could use your fingers, but I do find that these really do shine for that sort of thing. And if you would like a set of these Knipex flat nose pliers, please use the affiliates link in the description, because I get a little bit of a kickback from Amazon. No extra cost to yourselves, but it does help the show. So now I'm going to solder in this bottom tag 2, which is our earth connection, or ground. People always get bent up out of shape whether I say ground or earth or whatever. I mean, on a warship, every negative on the ship, everything's grounded, because you're sat in a metal tin with everything going to a saltwater base, you know. So we're less picky about whether we say ground or earth. Now, if you're just going to build this outright without testing the input cap, which I don't suggest you do because people's preferences are different, you could then put the input cap in here if you just want to put, say, a 5NF cap in or whatever, going from this pin here, which is our circuit input, or tag board input, going straight up to here. But because we're not going to be doing it like that, we're going to test out some caps. I'm just going to solder in this top, which feels a bit weird to me because I've never actually built one this way. I've always added the cap in and then soldered it, which is a bit mad. Now we're on to our first 47 microfarad cap. I'm using these absolutely huge caps. I mean, you can see the size of them compared to the board, and as such, I'm going to have to mess about with the legs to get it to fit. You could solder it into these center holes here, but I don't advise you doing that because we're going to use them for other things in a second. So what I do is I bend the legs over each other in like a V, bearing in mind that the actual body of the cap has got this insulation around it. So it doesn't really matter if you touch the edges there. I've had a few people quiz me on that. And then take your Knipex snips. I mean, you could use your flat nose pliers if you want, but for some reason I find the precision of the very tip of the Knipex snips just a bit better to do this bit, and we make that sort of shape. And what that's going to allow us to do is slide our cap through the center of these lugs and snip it off without it like fouling on the tags. So our positive end, which on this cap here is this end here with the bump in it. So yours may have a line down it showing which end's the negative. It may have the positive longer than the negative or whatever, but you don't want to orientate this the wrong way. Maybe you use a non-polar cap, I don't know, but that would be absolutely massive. But as you can see on our drawing, the positive side of this cap is going to point towards the bottom row. So I'm going to slide in the negative side into the top row on the 5th tag along, and the positive side is going to come into the bottom row on the 6th tag along. So kind of sit at a diagonal across the tags like so. Now this is where it gets interesting. I'm going to solder in this top tag like so, and we'll clean that up. Get rid of the leg, and as you can see, that is now in place. Now you could leave it like that if you want, and it looks great, it's fine, whatever, but it absolutely drives me wild having perfectly straight components all the way along and then one funky bent component. So what I like to do is just put one finger on its bottom end and one thumb on its face and just give it a twist until it goes straight. You know, I don't know how fragile the caps are that you're using, so you don't want to go mad, but just a little bit of a twist and straighten it up. And as you can see, that is nice and straight, and it kind of looks good on there. Brilliant. Then we can take one of our legs, probably not that one because it's a bit bent up. This one here looks good. And give it a little bit of a clean. I mean, you could use just regular old wire that you're going to wire the pedal up with, or you could use basically anything to connect this up. You know, uncoated wire like I have in the affiliates links down below, all of that. And what we're going to do is go from the 6 tag along in the top row to the 6 tag along in the bottom row where our positive end of our cap is. We're just going to join them two together with a link wire. I generally use the leg that come off the capacitor in the first place, but it's up to you. And you can actually solder both sides of that in now. And we all know that I love it when you can solder both sides in, because that means that there's no going back on yourself. It's done and good to go. I hate it when you spend all this time positioning a cap in a good place and then you can't solder it in. So by the time that you come to solder it, it's moved or you've knocked it out the way. Well, certainly what I do anyway. Right, so now that is in place. Next up, we've got our 2000 volt Sprague DC, 2000 volt DC. I've got to stipulate that because 2000 volts AC is insane. That's a lot of voltage. A lot of voltage. But 2000 volt DC is on a whole new level of insane. I've had a few electric shocks myself. I mean, I've had 440 AC numerous times. And the worst shock I've ever had is a 50 volt DC. So that kind of puts it in perspective of how much this can handle. But I'm going to go ahead anyway and just fit this cap between the 7th tag along on the top and bottom in exactly the same fashion as I fit this 47 microfarad. Now we're going to move on to the outside edge and the bits that fit in around everything else, so not in the centre anymore. Before we do that, looking at this, I've just remembered, if you use whatever cap you use, you need to be very careful that this here isn't too close to the transformer. What you don't want is these two touching each other or becoming really close together, because that'll induce noise. Just a quick tip, because in the past I've used some massive caps for this bit and always it induces noise. So that's where these domino caps come in nicely, because they're long and thin and it gives you that air gap between them. Anyway, the first component that we're going to add in on the outside edge is going to be our 1 meg anti-pop resistor. And I've of course got this carbon comp. All I'm going to do is I'm going to do what I call the Ibanez tube screamer method. And that is just because Ibanez, oddly enough, which no one seems to point out how odd this is, they mounted their resistors like vertical in their earlier pedals, which I just found to be insane. It's cool, but it's definitely different from everyone else. And we're going to be going from where our input cap comes in to ground to earth right here. And all I'm going to do is just lay that over in the 2 center holes, if you like so. And then we're going to solder in just the part that goes to the input cap. So we're not going to solder the earth in just yet. There. Magical. Now for this next bit, you've got a choice. The goal of this bit is to connect this end of this capacitor. As you can see on our drawing, this is connected to the output of our transformer control. So our signal is going to be coming into here and then going back out again and going to the input of our circuit, which is this tag here. So our choice is, we can either run a wire from here to here and another wire out, like off-board wiring, I would call that. Or we can connect them underneath the board and run, you know, one of our component legs from here to here. Nice. Or we can go in between the tags and go from here to here. Bearing in mind, we've still got to add this 47 microfarad cap to the board, and that's going to sit here. I don't really want to go on the top because it's going to be a bit congested. I don't want to go off-board wiring wise because I want to do it now, so I don't have to run a wire anywhere basically once we get this in the pedal, we can just run one wire to it. So I think my options there are just to go under the board. Now, because of the absolute pot mess that I made of the Timmy pedal that I did with underboard wiring, I'm still a bit ginger about doing this. I don't know, it really affected me. And if anyone's wondering, pot mess refers to one of the action dinners, if you like, meals that they do on board a warship. It's basically like a really crap version of stew that's made with tinned potatoes, tinned meat and tinned everything. You lash it all in a pot, heat it up to about 1,000,000 degrees so it's impossible to eat it. And then when you're in all your anti-flash and all of the battle gear, you've got to ram this hot stew-like tinned rubbish down your neck as fast as you can. In fact, you only get 7 minutes exactly to eat it. Horrendous. No one wants to go through action messing, we call it. Action messing or action food. It's bloody terrible. Anyway, I digress. So we're going to go from this tag here to this tag here. And now I know that this is definitely the right width. I know that this is definitely the right tag that I want to go into. So this should be exactly right. Now really I should like poke these through the holes and then solder it so you get that old mechanical connection that people love to tell me about. But I'm not going to. I'm just going to solder it to the top like that. I'm sure I'll get some hate in the comments for that. Please bring it on. But I've done this before and I've never, and I do mean never, had a problem with it. So take from that what you will. And this is probably my most built circuit. Out of everything, I would say I've built the absolute most Rangemasters because it's my favourite circuit. The last component to go in before our transistor is this trim pot. Now, before anyone asks, I don't have a line on where you can get any of these spectral trim pots from. Please don't ask me for a source on these potentiometers. Everyone always does straight after any video that I put them in. Apologies, I bought them all out and no, I don't want to sell them, thank you. What we're going to do is we'll bend one leg out. It doesn't matter which one, you can pick one. And that is going to go, I'm going to pick the left hand side one as I'm looking at it because that is just what I'm going to do. And plus it fits in this left hand side where we can get to it nice and easy and solder it in first. So this is going to go in 1, 2, which is our pickup simulator, 3, 4, 5, the 5th tag along. Now with this, you want to make sure that when you solder it, it's sitting as straight as it can sit because it's a nightmare to bend these legs once it's in there. We're using this like a variable resistor, so even though there's 3 connections, and as you can see, that's not exactly straight there. So I'm going to have to bend it, which these really don't like, which means putting more heat into it. And as I always say, potentiometers don't like the added heat, so I'm making a royal hash of this, trying to get a good picture. Okay, let's try that again. So now this is a good learning point. What do you do when you've soldered your connection? So our hole is soldered shut because I was faffing about trying to solder it in there and keep it straight while I've got a camera right in front of me so I can't move properly. Brilliant. But anyway, enough of the excuses and man up. I've soldered that closed. I've got my component, my trim pot, that really doesn't like heat. So I can't keep banging heat into it. What we're going to do is we're going to clean our tip, make sure it's as clean as it can get. Then I'm going to hold the trim pot exactly where I want it to go in, right up against where the hole would be. I'm going to touch it with our soldering iron, but I'm going to do my best not to touch anything else. So I position the tag board in a way that this doesn't really interfere. I'm not going to come over the top here. I'm not going to try and get it from this side because I'll touch them. You get it so then the barrel of the soldering iron comes in at an angle where there's not much for it to touch. This sits right over the hole where you want it to go, and then you kind of just touch the two together. And with your left hand you slide in your component that you want to go in the hole that you soldered by mistake, and there you go. It should just slot straight in. And at worst, if the solder isn't like perfect, once we've soldered our other side in, you can just go in and fix it. So our other side, this is what I was just about to explain before. Our trim pot has 3 connections. We have the two outside edges, and the wiper. All a wiper does is either connect to this one or this one, depending on where you set that. Depends on how much it connects to this and how much it connects to this. Fine. But we're not using it like that. We're using it like a variable resistor. So we only want 2 connections. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of my component legs, or you could use some wire or whatever. And I'm going to put the component leg through the hole, which is the 6th hole where we want to solder to. And I'm just going to solder that in place in the hole. Oh, I knew that was going to drop down. Oh well. And then I'm going to bend it in a manner where it touches both of our other legs. So it's going to touch this front leg, and it's also going to touch the wiper. Like so. And then all I'm going to do is just solder them in place. That way, yeah, let me get rid of the excess before I explain it. That way, what we've done is we have one side of our connection going here, then our signal is going to go round our trim pot, depending on where it's set, and then out the wiper and this leg and to this side. So these 3 connections here are all one, and all it is a resistance between this tag and this tag, and that's what we're going to use to set the bias of our transistor. There. Speaking of which, what a great segue. Next up is of course our transistor, and have I got a special one for you, and also some thoughts that you can use when you're choosing your own transistors. So here's the thing about the germanium transistor that everyone gets wrong. Everyone always chooses the highest gain possible with the lowest leakage possible, and they think that more is more. And usually it is. You're talking to the guy that loves massive capacitors in tiny little pedals. More is always more, except when it comes to the transistor. Most people would say 70 HFE up to 120 HFE would be perfect for the Rangemaster. However, for me, for the way that I like them, and also to get that vowely vocal sound that Brian May is known for, I think that you've got to go a bit lower than that. So 50 to 60 HFE gain is going to be that sweet spot to hit Brian May's tone. The question is, do you think that I stuck to my own advice here? Spoiler alert, I didn't. When it comes to a Rangemaster, this is the bit that you really need to pay attention to. It is, of course, the transistor. For this build, I'm going to be using my preferred CV7001. These are made by NKT. They are military spec variants of the NKT275. They are incredibly well made. I've got a batch of these that they all test pretty much exactly the same. Bang on for Rangemasters, which is great. So I've dug through the pile to get 3 variants so we can talk about, what effect the different readings will have on us. So let's give them a test. Of course, I'm testing with my Peak Atlas DCA 55. I get a real mixed response from electrical engineers about this bit of kit. People seem to want to poo-poo it, but for me, it is fantastic. It just does what it says on the tin. It does everything that you need it to. And yes, I know it only puts like 5 volts through when it's testing it. But what do you think the 9 volt pedal runs off? It runs off round about 6 or 7 volts. So I don't see what the problem is. Anyway, this is telling us we've got a PNP germanium. Gives us our pin out. It says that our current gain is 94. Right, so let's remember that for this one. 94. And by the way, check this out, right? I had Glim round at the weekend, my father-in-law, changing the strings on his telly, which he epically failed at, by the way, and leaving his crap all over my workshop. But it did give me something to write on for this video. So cheers, Glyn. Right, 94. And if we go through right to the end, we can see that our leakage is 0.163. So 163. Now, if you go by conventional wisdom, people will tell you that anything over 100.1 is unusable. That is absolutely ridiculous. You can go up to 300 before it makes any difference. Well, no, it does make a difference. That's a lie. Before it is significant. I don't like to go over 200 if I'm putting a single transistor in a pedal. If I was putting this on a switch with a silicon transistor, happy to go up to 300, because if there's an issue with it, you can just flip it over, you know the silicon's going to work. However, so for this one, we've got 94 HFE and 168 leakage. Now, zero leakage is obviously the best. I mean, in a fuzz, you want some leakage because the leakage is what helps it bias, but that is by the by. For these, you want to be aiming at under 200. So here we go. Second transistor. This one is also PNP germanium, of course it is. 88. That's another one that's higher than normal for these. 88. And if we keep going through, we can see that it is 134. 134. Now, I want to be clear that none of these transistors, even if you were using different transistors, different brands, whatever, none of them are going to be wrong, quote unquote. I get people asking me a lot, what is the right transistor for this? Well, the right one is the one that you choose, that you like the sound of. There is no right and wrong. This is the thing with an artistic endeavour. It's all about context. Do you like what you hear? If the answer is yes, then it's right. So this one is 77 HFE and 163 again. So 77, 163. Now, by conventional wisdom, all three of these are within the range of 70 to 120 that people like for range masters. Fine. For me, I prefer 50 or 60 HFE with leakage below 200. That would be my ideal transistor. And that's the one that I think would sound best for Brian May. However, I really want to use one of these military spec CV7003 transistors. So I'm going to use one of these three. What's the difference? Well, the higher up in gain in HFE you go, the more full and the more punch you're going to get. And some people may like that, but for Brian May, he has a really squawky, vowely tone. So I'm going to go with the lowest gain one, which is why I think that a 50 HFE or a 60 HFE would work much better for this, because Brian May's sound is kind of vocal, and the lower down in the gain you go, the more vocal your sound will be. And the higher up you go, the less vocal. So if you use something like a silicon transistor with a gain of anywhere between 300 and 500 HFE, it's kind of like 70s rock. It's raw, it's aggressive. It sounds amazing in context for that. In fact, the Sabbath boost that we did, that was great. It really did need the silicon, and I thought the silicon nailed it compared to the NKT275 that went into that one. But for this one, we know that Brian May used germanium. We know that he has like a really squawky, vowely sound. It's quite vocal, for lack of a better word. And for that, you're going to need the lower gain transistor. And if you think about it in pedal terms, if you have a lower gain pedal, it seems to be more vocal and more expressive than if you have something like, a super high gain monster. You don't get the same sort of response. Anyway, I'm going to put them to one side and we'll focus on this. We're going to add it into our board, and if we look on our drawing, we can see that our collector goes into the third tag along, our base goes into where our input cap goes in on the fourth tag along, and our emitter goes into the first leg of our trim pot, which is the fifth tag along. Now again, even though I know that there's a red dot on the side which tells me which is the collector, by the way, that's what that dot is, doesn't mean anything else, just let you know which one's the collector. And I know that the pinout on this goes collector, base, emitter, so I pretty much know it goes in that way around. I've built hundreds, if not thousands of these things, and I know it goes in that way, but I'm still, even after all of that, I'm still going to connect it up to the DC855, and I'm still going to check the pinout, because why not? Measure twice, cut once. Why would I risk this being a 1 transistor where for some reason the pinouts aren't the same. So red is the collector, good. Green is the base, good. And blue is the emitter, great. All right, so I didn't need to, but so what? It hasn't hurt. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to thread the legs through the center line, the center holes of the relevant tags there. And then once it's through and I've got my transistor to a reasonable height that I want, I'm going to bend the 2 outside legs out and I'm going to solder the center tag. Why am I soldering the center tag, you may ask? Well, that's easy. That's because when we turn it over, we can see it's not straight. We can straighten it out so then it's sitting nicely, it looks good. Now when we flip it over and solder it, I know that the transistor is like equal all the way around, so it's going to sit straight on the tag board. If we were to solder in all 3 legs straight away, it would have been sitting like wonky. Maybe we'd have to put more heat in it to straighten it out. It's just better doing it that way. There we go. There we have our germanium transistor now in. So what hardware are we going to need? Of course, we're going to need a 3-pole double throw switch, as ever. I like these gold pin ones. We're going to need a 9-volt DC jack, input and output jacks. We're also going to need a 10K and 100K potentiometers. Potentially the 10K pot, you could have it as either audio or as a linear pot. I know that Chris Vincent from R2R prefers the linear pots, but with that you get all of the action at the end of the travel. I believe that's what the original Rangemasters had, so if you wanted to put that in there, that would be great. Right now I've got a load of these dual concentric, well, stack pots. They're quite well built, so I'll be using that, and it is in fact an audio, so we're going to go with an audio potentiometer, which means that you get a smooth sweep all the way along. I mean, we're not going to get into logarithmic curves and anything like that on this video. Let's face it, I talk about enough board and stuff as it is. We don't need to be getting out the graphs. So, and also, if you want to make it really good, you need to have the ridiculous size washers and, of course, the Brian May knobs. There's going to be no knob choices on this one. There we have all of our hardware now on the enclosure. We're ready to go. All that we need to do to finish this part of it off is, of course, our knobs, but I'm not going to put them in just yet. I will wait until the pedal is finished. Now, there is one thing missing, which is, of course, our power filter. I'm going to be using these 3 tags here. I'm going to have my positive and my negative. I'm going to build the power filter in line with this drawing here from my buddy Jimmy, who, of course, made me this drawing because I was trying to explain it or drawing it by hand, and he come up with that amazing drawing. I mean, come on, we only have to look at the drawing for today's build to know that I should have really asked Jimmy to do it. I'm going to make that power filter, and it's going to be situated over in this corner here. So then I've got all of this space down here to run my wiring. I can come round the back to get to it. That'll be fine. And we've all seen the components before. There's a 100 microfarad cap, 100 nanofarad cap, and then 2 390 ohm resistors. I'm going to wire them up exactly the same way as I do in every other video. If this is your first video that you're watching and you want to see how these are wired up, please go to one of my last videos and you'll be able to see how I do it. There's our little filter circuit now in place in the pedal, and we are ready to wire it up. Let's get going. So, where to start? With this one, because we go through a few little things before we get to the circuit, i.e. the transformer, what I like to do is wire that in first. So just follow your signal chain from the input wire coming out of our 3-pole double throw switch through the circuit and then back to it, and then that way we know we're not going to miss anything. I know normally I would wire top left and then go along like as if I'm reading a book. However, this one's a little bit different than a regular pedal because we're going through that transformer, so I'm not going to go that way round. So first up, we're going to take some of our our little pink wire. I do love this silicone wire, by the way. If anyone wants it, there'll be a link in the description. We're going to go from this pin here, the first pin or front left pin on our 3-pole double throw switch. We're going to go from there. That's our input. Now, don't forget, after the whole Marcus Reeves video showing us how to wire in one of these switches, we will be putting in a link going over to that, so then it'll ground out when it's not on, but we'll do that later on. Right, so what I like to do is come round the back, and I would call this my ponytail, mainly because I've had to learn to do my daughter's hair in the past year or so, which has been challenging to say the least. Those who know me well will know that I have a full mop of curly hair, and my daughter's no exception, which makes it incredibly hard to do. Right, so our input goes to the bottom left tag on our tag board, which is the input to our transformer. So the first thing that your signal sees when it gets to the pedal is the impedance of the transformer. Goes in here. I'm just going to solder that straight in place. And then I'm just going to use my weird screwdrivers to manipulate the wire, so then it sits nicely behind there, tucked away, and that sits nicely there. There. Now our signal will go through the transformer, great, and it'll come out of this tag here and go to our 100k pot, which is basically our transformer control. What we don't want to do is wire that pot to ground. So this, what I would say, is pin 1. I'm going to snip that off, so then there's no way I go into auto mode and start wiring that to ground, because that's not how it works. What I will do is strip some of our wire and tin it and attach it to pin 3 of our pot, which is the input to the potentiometer. The wipers are usually, not always, but usually the wiper is on the way out of the potentiometer. So this bit here is our input. There we go. I tell you what, I've been watching more YouTube lately for guitar. So not that I don't watch it anyway, of course I do. But I stumbled across Milehouse Studios, the guitar builder from Plymouth, funnily enough, where I've spent most of my naval career, which is a fantastic place. But him, oh man, he's just so hilarious. And oddly enough, he's just turned up on the Anderton channel. I don't know why, if that's why he got fed to my algorithm or whatnot. But man, he's so good. He's hilarious. And he makes building guitars like so simple and easy to watch. I think I've watched like every video he's ever put out there now at this point. Me and Glyn have been glued to watching him build a Telecaster in the vein of George Harrison. Fantastic. And of course he was on the Anderton channel just, which is fantastic. It's good to see someone from Plymouth smashing it in the guitar scene, because there was loads of guitar shops when I was starting out in Plymouth, like absolutely loads, way more than anywhere else I've served. Right, so as I say, our signal's coming through the transformer, out and going to our potentiometer. There. Our signal now needs to go into the pedal. So we come out of our potentiometer. I'm going to start my wiring loom coming down here, come back along and join this wire here and go to the bottom of this capacitor here. There's our input now wired up. Then our signal's going to go through our pedal, do its magic, and then it's going to come out of the pedal at the transistor. So if we look at our drawing here, we can see that up here on the collector of the transistor, the signal comes out and goes to pin 3 of our 10k potentiometer. It then goes through our potentiometer and out of pin 2 and goes to the top half of our output cap, which is our Sprague 2000 volt DC cap. Some may say is over the top, and I say you're missing the point. And then it comes out of our Sprague output cap. I'm going to send it round the front here so that it can join this wiring loom and go to our front right pin. Next up, I'm going to wire in my negative, so my ground wire. I'm going to start off with the input and output jacks, and I'm going to use some of this solid core wire. This stuff is just a solid piece of copper with some sheathing, some coating on the top. In the affiliates links in my description, I'll either have, depending if you're in the US or the UK, I'll either have this stuff or some uncoated stuff. I tend to prefer the uncoated stuff because you don't have to scrape the coating off, and that's kind of nice. But anyway, I just kind of scrape it off like this. Oh my God. Well, that was terrible. What was I playing at there? Right, let's straighten it out. Clearly, I left one of the legs here too long. I didn't measure that very well. It's always the thing when I'm on camera. I'm trying to like bend myself into shape so then I get it like the best possible view in focus on camera. And let me tell you, a cameraman I am not. I of course didn't have a clue how to film anything before YouTube. I started off with my lad who's 18. I started off with his GoPro that I bought him when he was like 7 or 8, and then slowly worked my way up. But I still edit these on my phone, believe it or not. Right, so once they're soldered in, now a lot of people say that you don't need to solder in these jacks because they are up against the enclosure, which is grounded out or what have you. But for me, you better solder in them because if something comes loose, you really do want that connection there. Now, the next thing to do is to wire in our 9-volt jack, the earth, and all I do is just put a tiny little bend in a component leg, which is why you never throw your legs away. Slot it down and hook it through the if I can, hook it through the 9-volt negative tag on our jack, and then we can solder that in place on the tag itself. Then for the top part, all we have to do is bend it around our copper wire and give that a solder too. And what that does is that attach both of our jacks to earth, to ground, and it'll also by proxy attach our enclosure to ground, which means that we'll get less noise interference from outside the pedal. That's our earth wired up in exactly the manner that I described. Next, we're going to go on to our 9 volts. Now the 9 volts is a little bit different. As we can see in here, we've got one leg of our LED going through the 9 volts. That's obviously the anode, and the cathode is sticking out the front here. So the anode is going through here. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a wire from this pin here, and I'm going to run the end of the wire a little bit longer so I can join it to this pin here, because we're not going to have a battery. We're just running 9 volts straight into the pedal. So I'm going to join these two together. Then my wire is going to come round here, right the way round our wiring loom, and end up at one of our resistors on our power filter. It doesn't matter which one, but we'll end up at one of our resistors on our power filter. Then we're going to come out of the other resistor on our power filter, probably this one actually, and that's going to go straight to our board. But if we look at our drawing, we can see that it's not going to one place on our board, it's actually going to 2. So it's going to the bottom of this 47 UF cap, this 47 microfarad cap, it's going in there, but it's also going to the 68K resistor. So our third tag along on the bottom row. So what I'll do is I'll run a component wire from here straight down to here, and there's our solid connection again. It just adds a bit of rigidity to the whole thing. Then I'm also going to run a wire coming out of here and going into our 68K. Really, I should have run that under the board before I started, but I didn't think about it. Next up is going to be our input and output. Now remember that this pedal is now upside down, so our input is on the left. I can't tell you how many times that I've wired these pedals in backwards. Works in bypass, you turn it on, nothing. And it's because you forget that you're looking at it upside down. So here's our input jack, and that's our input here. It's going to follow right the way around the back, go up the ponytail and into the center left pin on our 3-pole double throw switch. This tag here is our output, we're going to run a wire, same wiring loom right the way around, up the same ponytail and into the center right pin of our 3-pole double throw switch. So our signal can come from here round, goes into here. Now, when we turn the pedal on, it attaches to our input to our circuit. But when we turn it off, we want it to go to the output. So we have to put a loop in between this tag here and this tag here. And that's because these 3 here are all independent switches. This center pin can either attach here or it attaches here, depending on which way it's switched. So when we're attached this way, the signal goes through the pedal. When we're attached this way, it's going to go through our little loop and then out of this tag here and round to our output jack, i.e. in bypass. Before we move on any further and I forget, I'm going to do the little trick that I learned from Marcus Reeves. And I know this has probably been out there and everyone's been doing it for forever, but I genuinely just didn't ever think about it. And that is to add in this little earth that goes from the center pin at the back here to our input jack. And all that does is when the pedal is off, it just earths out the input to the circuit, and thus stopping any noise transfer from the circuit into our signal chain. Brilliant. So thank you, Marcus, for that. He does these awesome Monday Minute or little lessons and stuff on Instagram, and I'm pretty sure he shares them as YouTube shorts as well. So I would definitely give him a follow if you don't already. I'm sure everyone does. Now, the last thing to do before we add in 7,000 cable ties, of course, the last thing to do is to add in a wire coming from here round our ponytail and to our LED. This is the ground wire. This is that allows the voltage and the current and whatnot to go through our LED and light it up and go to ground. If you were to wire just the wiring, like I've done many times, and I almost just did them while I was thinking about it, you'll just blow your LED out because there's too much current going through it. It just can't handle it. So what you need to add in is a current limiting resistor. The choices are, the lower the value you go, 1K or so, will mean a brighter LED. I don't like a bright LED. I like something that you can see but doesn't blind you. And you know, if you're on stage, I can imagine it'd be most annoying if you turn it on and you've got this like Eye of Sauron sort of thing beaming out. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to add in a 10K resistor. But I'd like to know in the comments, what value resistor do you normally use? This is our pedal pretty much wired up now. All we've got to do is add in our cable ties and then also add in our input cap. There's our temporary cap in place. And as we can see, the LED does light up. And of course, I'm going to be using my trusty Fluke 101 to test this. You can own a Fluke 101 yourself if you follow the Amazon affiliates link in the description. Of course, I do get a little bit of kickback, which helps fund the show. So we're going to put it into volts DC, which automatically detects the voltage range. Some of them you have to set between, like, you know, volts, millivolts and all that jazz. We don't have to on this one. I'll put my negative lead to the enclosure, so I'll go through that hole there. And then we're going to be measuring the collector, which on our drawing we can see is the 3rd pin along on the top. Right. I'm going to need a bit of a... No, I'll use this screwdriver for it. So if we go to our collector, we can see there that we're at 8.6 volts. Now, I like to set mine round about 6.5 volts, but 7 volts is ideal. It's a preference thing. When you do it by ear, you can kind of hear the pedal open up as you get close to it. So there, this is setting rather easy, probably because the transistor's so good. If you have like an out of spec transistor, setting this is going to be an absolute nightmare. So a lot of people like it at 7 volts. Conventional wisdom was that it would be 6 volts. However, I'm going to try and set it somewhere in the middle just to give us a bit of a swing, just in case temperature differences cause any issues. There we go. That is that all sorted out. I'm going to go ahead and clip this cap out. In fact, we'll do that now. Now I am wasting a mustard cap there because that's too short for anyone to do anything with. Huzzah, oh well. And now what we'll do is we'll hook it up to our amplifier, and you'll get to hear it basically as I touch the caps onto these two wires. You'll hear it with the different values. One of the sneaky little things that you can do with this circuit is alter the input capacitor. This, along with the germanium transistor, is where you find the vocal vowely sound that you get in these old Rangemasters. Brian May's tone has this upper mid frequency that just sings, and I think that this is going to be the point of the circuit where we get to manipulate that tone. The value I settled on today has a really juicy honking mid sound that is unmistakable, and I think you're going to agree with me. When I test the different transistors, I'll be willing to bet that you choose the same one that I chose. If that's not the case, I would love to hear in the comments which capacitor you would have chose and why. This is the pedal in bypass. I mean, I will be running it with, well, let's turn that off a sec. I will be running it with both controls up full, so we've got everything maxed out, so then we can hear exactly what is going on. What have we got? We've got a 2NF capacitor, so a 2000 picofarad capacitor, a 5.6 NF capacitor, a 20 NF capacitor, 47 NF capacitor, and then a 100 NF capacitor. And we'll start off at the lower end and work our way up, and we'll just see what each capacitor does to the sound. Okay, so if I turn the pedal on, bearing in mind you're not going to hear any sound until I touch these two pins with this with this resistor, with this capacitor, because that's what makes the circuit. So let's give it a go. Ooh. So that is our 2NF capacitor. Now we're going to go on to the 5.6 NF cap. Right, there's our 5.6 NF cap. Now onto the 20 NF cap. As you can hear, it's starting to get really dark now, which is kind of not the Brian May sound. Let's go up to 47 NF, even though, let's face it, I don't really think there's much point in going this high. As you can see, that's almost getting into fuzz territory there, and we'll do the 100 NF because we've got it here. Again, not really the Brian May thing. So for me, all they can go. All that we should really have left is the 2NF and a 5.6 NF cap, and that should give us a good idea between the two of which we prefer. So let's start with the 2NF cap. See, that's quite vowely. That's the sound, kind of thing I was on about before. It's almost like a Q filter, you know. So there's our that's our 2NF cap. And now onto the 5NF cap. I actually really like the sound of the 2NF cap, to be fair. So there's the caps that we have. Which would you choose? Would you have chose the 2NF cap or the 5NF cap, 5.6 NF cap? Now I know that I could put these on a switch and have both, but really there's no space for it. If we can just spin that round with these knobs on it, I mean, I'll have to undo them to get them on there, but there really isn't any space to fit a switch in anywhere on this compact enclosure, which is what I really wanted to have, you know, a compact enclosure, so then it'll fit on a pedal board and have that Brian May sort of vibe. So the question is, which one of these would you choose? Please let me know in the comments, and let me know if I've chosen completely wrong, because we all know I'm going to go with my initial instinct, which is the 5.6 NF cap. And now it is of course time for the sound sample. I've had plenty of people telling me off for either playing guitar in the sound samples or other people telling me off for not playing guitar in the sound samples. So today I'm going to hedge my bets and I'm going to do both. And I'm not just going to do both, I'm going to play the Germanium Rangemaster into the front of my Victory V40, which is a great pedal amplifier. And then you'll also get to hear the TC Electronics wiretap playing a little signal through the pedal of someone who can actually play guitar, who isn't playing that one terrible lick that I know. So someone actually playing guitar. But what you've got to bear in mind is this is a digital signal, so the impedance is all messed up. What we're going to see is that this pedal handles the TC Electronics fine, no problem at all. I'll even put it next to a normal Rangemaster without the transformer circuit, and you'll get to hear the difference. I want to know what you think of the pedal, what you think of the build. And don't forget, there are 3 of these pedals available. 3. Once they're gone, they're just gone. There is no more. Thank you for buying pedals from me and supporting the show. It really, really helps keep the Hello Sailor Effects dream alive. Already you can hear that's quite vocal in its nature. Sounds really spiky, like vowely and full. You know what I mean? And with it off, yeah, it really sounds that way. What happens if we dial a transformer back a bit? And all the way off. And then back up again. And then if we dial back on the boost, better just cranking everything. Anyway, that's how that sounds. Right, now we're going to try it with the Strat. I'm going to go on a bridge pickup and probably one of the 2 and 4 positions, whatever. I don't think this sounds anything like Brian May myself because it isn't this out of phase sound. And coincidentally, I'm not a Strat guy. As I'm resting my palm here and picking, I'm going to hit this middle pickup. It's going to sound worse than normal, but let's give it a try. You can really hear the vowel sound come out there. God, that middle pickup is brutal in a way. And if we dial it back a bit. I mean, we all know that the Strat is my sort of thing. Coincidentally, this Strat is up for sale. If anyone's interested in a 1977 hardtail Strat, it actually rings like a bell. And it's, I mean, look at the state of it. If anyone's going to play a guitar that much to remove poly finish like that, has to be a good one, right? But I just don't like this middle pickup. Watch my new Telecaster video coming soon, where I build a telly that I actually want. So you've heard the Victory V40, which is a fantastic pedal platform. Probably one of the best you can get. But now we're going to be going into the front of my 1950 Filmo sound, converted into a Dumble Tweedledee Deluxe. I'm going to be using this. Again, first, I'm going to use the Melody Maker. It's my favourite guitar, has to be used. And then we'll go on to the Strat so that we get a bit more Brian May flavour. Of course, it's all going to be on a bridge pickup because I'm lazy. Here's my clean tone. There's no clean tone there, is there? I'll show you the settings in a minute. It's all on 1 o'clock. That's without the pedal even on. And this amp really does clean up. Fantastic amp, but let's hear how the Rangemaster sounds. And, 'cause, I mean, look at the state of it. If anyone's going to play a guitar that much to remove poly finish like that, has to be a good one, right? But I just don't like this middle pickup. Watch my new Telecaster video coming soon, where I build a telly that I actually want. So you've heard the Victory V40, which is a fantastic pedal platform. Probably one of the best you can get. But now we're going to be going into the front of my 1950 Filmo sound, converted into a Dumble Tweedledee Deluxe. I'm going to be using this. Again, first, I'm going to use the Melody Maker. It's my favourite guitar, has to be used. And then we'll go on to the Strat so that we get a bit more Brian May flavour. Of course, it's all going to be on a bridge pickup because I'm lazy. Here's my clean tone. We'll dial that back, the transformer back a bit. Sounds much better with it all the way up, doesn't it? And there you go. That's how it sounds with the P90s. Here we go with the Strat on the bridge pickup. How's it sound going into the 1950 Filmo sound? And now with the Rangemaster. Ah. Does it clean up? Not really, not with that up. But if we turn our transformer control down a little bit, sounds much better with it all the way up though. Now the question is, how does the... Get rid of that noise. Now the question is, how does the transformer help this Rangemaster deal with the input impedance mismatch? So for that, we're going to head over to the TC Electronics wiretap, and we're going to put some signal through this one and a standard Hello Cellular Effects Rangemaster. I hope you enjoyed this build. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'm always amazed how many people actually make it to the end of these videos. If you like this build, you're going to love this build where I build a Black Sabbath treble booster.